I walked to the South Pole 32 years ago. I walked under the hole in the ozone layer. My eyes changed colour. I was badly burnt on my face. And Barney turned to me and he said, "Dad, it's time we did something." And I said, yeah, we're trying. And he said, no, it's time you walked again to the South Pole. And this time we should undertake our journey only on renewable energy. And I remember sort of shrinking in the car thinking, do I really have to do this again? At the age of 61, it's not something that people should do. And Barney convinced me that together as father and son, together as the millennial generation and the older generation, we need to join together, because this can't be a bunch of young people thinking one thing and a bunch of old people thinking the other. We've got to join together because we are in a survival situation here on planet Earth, and this required a huge effort because we would be pioneering the use of using renewable energy to melt snow and ice into hot water, which has never been done before, especially on the move in the Antarctic. From the edge of Antarctica, the journey would be, if completed, 600 miles on foot from the edge of Antarctica to the South Geographic Pole. The most hostile place on Earth, a place that wants you dead from the moment you would go there, and if you forget that, you will die.
Dad is 61. He's not 40. He's not 50. And once we were out there for 3 weeks, even 2 weeks, I really began to see the degree of suffering that I've never seen in my father before. He is from a generation and is built of steel, and he himself is built of concrete. And I saw him go to places that I wouldn't wish people to go to. He was bleeding. He was just good old-fashioned suffering. I mean, it was something to behold.
The surface of Antarctica has changed, like a pie crust, a solid feeling surface, but then your skis would go through. This was hard for me because I'm the first person that walked to both poles. I'm meant to be the tough person, but because I couldn't recover, gradually I was slipping behind. The surfaces were entirely different than they had been for me 32 years ago. So those first 25, 29 days for me were a period of total destruction, mentally, physically, emotionally, and the sweetest thing and the most wonderful thing is that my son understood that. And every evening I might be 20 minutes late to the camp because I couldn't hold them up. So I had to be behind, they had to keep the mileage ahead, and Barney, bless his heart, regardless of the weather, would be pitching our little tent. To be unable to show my injuries to my own son, because Barney might have told our brilliant navigator and leader, Dad's dying, and the next thing an aeroplane would have arrived to take me out. So that was a very, very, very rough time, and it came to a moment when Barney and I really had to decide.
His legs, his inner thigh, everywhere in between, I mean, it was like repellent. We're talking like bits of flesh falling off him. He was decaying. All it takes is that 1 degree too far and you can die. And I was literally watching my father on the slow road to death. In the day that he made the decision to head back to the base camp, and I watched his head fly off, this sort of gaunt, sort of almost zombified frame. Definitely a moment that was a little extra quiet. To see him disappear and to be left in that silence was something to remember. It was definitely defining.
It was the worst moment of my life for the simple reason that I knew what lay ahead. I knew what -40 would happen. I was worried about Barney's feet. I felt a failure. I felt a failure as an expedition. I felt as an expedition leader. I felt a failure for my son. I felt absolutely appalling. But I knew that this expedition wasn't about Robert Swan. This expedition was about inspiring people on energy use. It was about doing the right thing. And the right thing for me to do was to put myself second and the expedition first. And I just had to, for once in my life, realise my limitations. And I went back to the base and had the worst week of my life dealing with the word failure. I had to then watch their progress, and I had to listen to what was happening with my son's feet. And Barney still can't walk properly now, and his feet were turning black. 2 more days at -40, Barney would have lost his toes forever. You can't stick toes back on. No plastic surgeon can do that. And I had to listen to this on the radio. And I was sitting there thinking I should be there. Imagine if your child's foot was turning black. That was part of it. But at the same time, I had confidence, because the last thing I said to Barney as I got on that plane, I said, just remember whose son you are. My blood's in your blood, and you can bloody do this. And to do it, he had to go through, hell, and he's still going through hell, but we did it. I just was worried how much, being my son, he'd damage himself in the process of making it.
There was definitely a couple of moments for the first week or so after leaving him. It's just looking behind, and I don't know if it was a mirage or just my imagination, but there was definitely like his essence was there, pulling that sled, following us from behind. My worst day, day 45, I couldn't feel my feet the day before, and basically they were being numb during the day, and then they would wake up in my sleeping bag, which was excruciating. It feels like razors when they wake up, and they didn't wake up that night on day 44, and then come day 45, they haven't woken up for a day and a half, and I'm sitting there looking at my blue and black and blistered feet and looking at my bleeding crutch, and just thinking, what am I doing out here? It's like, this is just brutal. It was a horrible moment. It felt like everything just kind of closed in, and obviously the tent's only this high to begin with, so you're in this tent that's flapping with the wind, and it's there's ice falling from the top of the tent into your sleeping bag, onto your face. You're trying to make food and fuel, make the fire to make the boiling water with hands you can't feel. I still can't feel most of my hands. Dad can't either. They're still pretty numb and tired. I can't feel any of my toes still. They're still all waking up. But that day 45 was something to behold. In that suffering, in that serious pain, in that everything that moment entailed, I had a safety net. I had that eject button on offer, and it was my choice to be in that position of pain, in that position of suffering. And so many people don't have a choice. And to come home, have these conversations about emissions, renewable energy, sustainable development, I mean, that was a fuel, but the fire was the moment. And that sounds super cliched, but once you're out there and there's nothing but white and a horizon 360 degrees that is just ice, the moment is really all you have to play in, and that's where you find your commitment to go for an extra hour, or your commitment to go for an extra 2 weeks. I'm still cutting bits of dead flesh off my toe in the evenings, because you have to get rid of the dead stuff so it can grow back.
What we're really talking about here is generations joining together, because we're in a survival situation. We can't have 2 lots of people working side by side.
Or you die.
Great families must join together. Wealthy people, like the people who come to Davos, have got to join. The families must join together. They must work together harder on this issue. The greatest moment of the whole expedition was when I re-met with them. A moment where I let go of so many things in life because he'd done it, and those stupid words like failure and everything else disappeared, because there he was in my arms. But I put my arms around him and it just seemed to keep going on forever, because he'd become so thin, and that was hard. But he was there, and I was backed in a silly way to look after him. We were going to make it, and everything that we were doing, the renewable energy, the Shell biofuels, everything was working, and we were going to bloody make the South Geographic Pole together. 32 years ago we'd staggered in. I'd lost 69 pounds in 70 days and was in pretty bad shape. 32 years on, we arrived together to start something, because as we all know, you need a story to get people's attention. But we want it simply to mean that if we made the effort to do what we've done, especially what Barney did, then other people could make some small efforts themselves.
When you get to the pole, there's a silver sphere. It's about this big and it's reflective. To see your beard and your face all messed up and your lips cracked, and to be like, that's me? But in that moment, it wasn't the end of a journey, it was the beginning of a journey. And I am truly proud of what we've done with not only the renewable energy, but how we've taken into consideration all of the emissions that it's taken. Having these sort of dialogues, that's how we create the change. And we hopefully can inspire other people to consider the emissions that it takes to have a absolutely fantastic Instagram feed with all of these amazing places around the world. I want people to go and experience, want people to go and adventure, want people to become engrossed in different cultures, and I want people to do business, and I want industries to grow, but I don't want it to be at the expense of our planet. And walking over 60%, 70% of the world's fresh water, 90% of the world's ice, patches of ice that are miles deep, Antarctica is going to come and kick us in the backside if we're not careful. If people don't take that seriously, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
And what Barney and I are really saying is that there are simple things that people can do, anybody can do. We can actually buy green electricity. All you have to do is to ring up your utility. In some countries you can't, but in most Western countries, by law, you can buy green electricity. It costs you $2 a week. It doesn't mean that the solar panels on top of your house, it could come from a solar farm in the middle of Arizona or somewhere, but you can buy green electricity. You can use a solar panel. One's diet. One of the biggest threats to our planet is the fact that everybody sort of thinks it's cool or means something to sort of eat meat now. We need to think about our diet.
Even if it's just one less meat meal a week. If it's Monday and Friday you decide not to have meat, globally we all did that, it would be huge. And
you know, our transport, electric cars,
waste management,
you know, waste management, recycling, all those things. Rather than just talking about it, we actually need to do it.
I really think it's about changing people's behavior, and I think it comes down to two things fundamentally, in my opinion. It's either status or it's economics that are going to affect people. If Justin Bieber, Kim Kardashian, you know, name 5 other people like that, it suddenly became the trendiest thing to count your emissions and to offset and to become active in really pursuing sustainable solutions. Everyone would do it. It would be a cultural revolution overnight. And on the inverse of that, if you don't care about celebrities, if you can save a buck or make a buck out of becoming sustainable, whether that be through rebates, incentives, whatever it be, those are the two things that are going to change things on a big level. And I think in our own small way, we've shown that father and son, two very different people. If two very different people can come together with a shared mission and actually give two hoots about the planet and take into consideration emissions, corporations, adventure companies, pursuits like Davos, all of these places and these things can do more. And the time for talk and the time for inconvenient truth is over. We know what's happening. We need solutions now or we're in trouble. And that's not fear-mongering, that's not being negative, that's a reality.